Welcome back to The Current. Thanks for joining us again today. Today, I am very blessed to have with us Chelsey Brunt, who, if that name sounds familiar, she is the daughter of Alan and Josie Brunt, who are beloved members of Living Water Church and have been a tremendous blessing ever since they came to the church. Chelsey is a soccer player and a soccer coach. She is currently the director of women's soccer at Cumbre Alta, which is in Ecuador, in Quito, Ecuador. And she joins me to talk about sports, about soccer, about coaching, about those special relationships that develop on a team and between a player and a coach, how that can be part of a journey toward discipleship, where we find connection and community and all of it, and how we make these deeper bonds through the beautiful game of soccer. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I know I did. Here it is. Well, Chelsey, thank you for coming on here. You're doing me a huge favor. Appreciate you. We love your parents, and it's been just like such a blessing to have them in the community, and then to have you come through. And then, as I shared with you earlier, like I'm thinking of doing a little more coaching myself. So this is like a great opportunity for me to learn from you. So maybe could you just start out by telling us like how'd you find your way into coaching soccer and into like this ministry in Ecuador specifically? But like how did it all come to be?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is exciting and it's fun to connect with you. How I started with soccer was, I played soccer my whole life. Absolutely loved the game. I played all the way through high school, got a scholarship to go to college. And it was in my final college season that I had a teammate ask me, "So what's next? You gonna coach?" And I told her, "Absolutely not. No way. That sounds so boring. And does anyone listen to their coaches anyway?" Um, and so that was kind of my perspective because I just loved to play.
Okay.
And about a year after that conversation, I got a phone call from my church pastor. And he said that a local high school was looking for a JV soccer coach. And again, I told him, I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested. I'm still playing. And he kind of convinced me that, you know what, it doesn't matter. I didn't really have any experience. But this local high school, basically, they just needed somebody to show up. They didn't have a really good record. They didn't have a good program. It was in a super diverse neighborhood in San Diego. And
Mhm.
he convinced me I'd lived a little bit in South America. It was a huge Hispanic population. And he convinced me that this was an opportunity to connect with the Hispanic culture and community there and just to give it a try. So that's how I got into coaching.
Okay.
It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I think that season was the hardest season I've ever experienced. This doesn't give me much credibility as a coach, but we didn't win a single game. And I think in
Hmm.
that entire season, we scored one goal.
Interesting.
But
Yeah,
that goal
that's
was really well celebrated.
I bet, yeah.
And yeah, so like that's kind of how I got into coaching. I'll be honest, even at the end of that season, I thought about it. I was like, this, I don't think is for me. Like this was super tough. But at the end of this season, typically in like high school sports and most sports, you do kind of like an award ceremony at the end. And so
Hmm.
we celebrated with the girls, just kind of making it to the end. And the team surprised me with a homemade scrapbook of notes from every single player about what the season meant to them.
Oh.
And there was stuff that the girls had written down that I had no idea was going on or that they were impacted by. And so, looking at the soccer side of things, or from the outside, it was a total failure of a
Mhm.
season. But on the inside, the girls just communicated that the fact that I showed up was
Mhm.
what meant the most to them. And so that kind of got me thinking and realizing that, I'm not called to be the best soccer coach in the world. Doesn't matter if we score a million goals, but like who we are as Christian is God's just calling us to show up in people's lives
Yeah.
and to be there for them. And I love the game. I love soccer. And I was like, you know what, God, like if this is the avenue or the door that you're opening so that I could show up into the lives of these young girls who have nobody speaking to their lives, pouring into them or investing in them, then let's do it. Like, I'm available. Let's go for it. And at the time I was like, I would prefer to not lose every game again. And so I started getting into coaching licenses or like
Hmm.
studying, and that kind of got the ball rolling to then I pursued my master's in athletic administration and soccer coaching.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it all got started. A lot of
Yeah.
no's first, and God just continued to open the door and work on my heart to see the impact that a coach could make.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I love that. It's in some ways I feel like it's harder coaching kids that are a little lower skilled because they just can't do the things that you want them to do. You know what I mean? And then and losing stinks, even when you're like, this is about player development and this is about the relationships, like it still is just painful to to lose all the time.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been through a lot of painful seasons. Hmm.
Well, so like as a player, I mean, you've talked about your love for soccer. You grew up playing, you played in college. Where did you play in college? Or yeah, tell us
To
about your
Trinity
soccer
Christian.
journey. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I started playing soccer when I was 4 years old. Really, I loved sports. I was competitive. My parents needed me to be active in doing something, or I would
Yeah.
be in trouble.
Hmm.
And so I did a lot of sports, but soccer, I really loved soccer. I loved the team aspect of it because I did some individual sports and like that was fine, but there was a lot of pressure.
Hmm.
And I didn't just love like the spotlight on myself. And so I loved being a part of a team. And I think with soccer, like I just felt like I was a part of something that was so much bigger than myself.
Hmm.
And that's what drew me to the sport. And so I played since I was 4. I did rec leagues and then I got into club and I basically played year round and absolutely loved it. And played in high school. And I knew I wanted to play in college. And so I was able to get a scholarship. I went to Trinity Christian College in Chicago. And again, it was like living the dream. Like I got to play soccer with my best friends, do college life, and from there, because soccer in the States and at the time, like women's soccer wasn't as big as it definitely is now, and there wasn't a
Yeah.
professional league. And so it was kind of like the college soccer season, like that's the end of your career. And I accepted that. And that's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I wasn't really interested in going into coaching because I was like, I just love to play. And so that's kind of my soccer journey. And while I was in college, one of the things that happened. I went to college in Chicago and from San Diego. It was a dramatic change in climate, and
Yes.
I could not handle the cold winters. And so I got to the point where I was like, I'm going to transfer. Even though
Mm.
I love my college soccer team and what I'm studying and everything, I'm going to transfer because I can't handle another Chicago winter, or maybe
Mm.
I'll do semester abroad. And my coach was like, please don't do anything dramatic. Just try a semester abroad and come back. And so I looked up what would be the warmest place in Ecuador. It means equator.
Okay.
And so I was like, it's got to be warmer in Ecuador than it is in Chicago. And so that's kind of how I got introduced to Ecuador as a
Oh,
country. I came down to Ecuador on what is basically like an intro to missions semester abroad program. I studied Spanish, and the whole time I was here, I played soccer. I played soccer in the park.
yeah.
I hung out with a lot of locals, and again, like women's soccer was not a thing down here, so I was the known female soccer player from the States that played the gringa at the park. So that's kind of how I fell in love with Ecuador, the food, their culture, what God's doing here. And then from there, it was just kind of trying to figuring out like what's next. And God kind of opened the door after I moved back to the States that somebody heard about the girl who played soccer here and they gave me a call.
So you were famous already before you went down there with, to do what you're doing now.
I don't know if famous is the right word, but
No, you're
I'm telling you,
known all over Ecuador.
I was unique
Yeah.
because there weren't females who were playing soccer down here.
Yeah.
And so that's just the scene. Unfortunately, it's changed over the past 10 years a little bit, but it's a very small community. And so
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of people out there who know who I am simply because of that.
Yeah.
I would play at the park and people come up to ask to take pictures of me
Oh, really?
because they thought that I knew like Alex Morgan,
Oh,
or
yeah.
they thought that I played on the professional soccer team. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. I'm really just a peanut soccer player in the States in comparison. But the female soccer world is so different here that anyone from the States really is a soccer star.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I mean now there's a lot more women playing in Ecuador, partly because of you and like the things that you guys are doing with Cumbre Alta and all that, right? So like, what are you doing in Ecuador?
Yeah, so that's the goal, to be able to kind of open the door for girls, and not just open the door, but I mean the reality is they want to play, and they've wanted
Yeah.
to play for a long time. They just haven't had the opportunity to play. And so me coming from the States where I got to play at 4 years old, and
Hmm.
there's a bunch of young girls my same age that are playing all across the United States. I'm coming from a point of privilege. Like this was an opportunity that everyone had basically, and then stepping into the soccer scene here for women, that's just not the case. And
Hmm.
so as a club, and it's one of the big things that my boss kind of when he started the sports ministry about 10 years ago is he wanted to start a women's team alongside the men's program to be able to speak value into women's lives and give them the
Hmm.
space and the opportunity that they're just not getting anywhere else.
Right.
And that's kind of where my role came in. So I started the women's soccer team, and now it's developed into a program. And so what it looks like for me is we have a top women's team that's competing in a regional amateur league.
Hmm.
And we now have, within the past 4 years, Ecuador now has a women's professional team. And so we're actually one game away from classifying for national playoffs, and from
Cool.
there would be promoted to the women's professional league. So part of the goal is that we would be promoted and be in the professional space. Our men's team is already professional, and so that we would be in that space to be able to pour into the athletes at that level, kind of increase
Hmm.
our sphere of influence, and be able to share the love of God in that space, and have that kind of trickle down to now our youth programs. So we have youth soccer teams, and then we also have youth competitive soccer teams, and then we have rec soccer teams. We probably have a total of around 250 soccer players
Hmm.
here in Quito that are a part of our club. And then we have coaches who most of which have been players on our team, have kind of been mentored, and then now are mentoring the next generation of players. And from there, I mean, a lot of what we do is outside the soccer field.
Right.
So we my like day to day is what it looks like. There's a lot of soccer practice and soccer games.
Hmm.
But outside of that, it's meeting with players one on one, it's doing get togethers, having team events and activities. We have kind of like a non traditional church for our soccer players
Hmm.
to get connected, to go deeper. And we work with Fellowship of Christian Athlete chaplains to provide devotionals and spiritual discipleship for our players. So that's kind of what I do here in Ecuador. And then we also have a club team in the States, and then run soccer camps over the summer. So we're busy. We got a lot going on. So if you know of
I
any
mean,
coaches that want to come down, we're open.
all right. Well, that's good to know. And I mean, it sounds like you're super busy. You have players like essentially at every level of the game, right? From
Mhm.
almost professional, hopefully professional soon, all the way down to just like recreational beginners. And I mean, it sounds pretty awesome. And you get to like invest in the lives of the kids and the adults, I guess, in such deep ways. You've kind of hinted at it a couple times, but I guess like the reason part of the reason I wanted to talk to you on this podcast to begin with was because I can see from my own experience in sports and from now my kids' experience in sports how many different ways like being on these teams and like having a coach invest in you and having like the relationship with your teammates. Like I feel like there's several different levels and ways that develops you as a person. And I know that your primary goal, obviously you're trying to develop soccer players and you're obviously doing a very good job of it if you're like I got semi-pro on the edge of like promotion team going. But it seems like your bigger priority is more developing people, right, leaders and disciples. And so like how do you balance that? Do they just go together 100%? Like where are those
Mhm.
priorities and like how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean that's the tough question, is to continually to be missional minded and making decisions both on the soccer field and off about how we pursue our goal to excel professionally, but to also continue to invest in the players that are entrusted to us.
Hmm.
And so I think there's always kind of a tension there. But I think that that's the neat part, is because you're always trying to figure out how to consistently reach the players that are a part of your team and a part of your program while trying to excel on the field, but also the relational side and this spiritual discipleship is what's really important. And we found with our players, I mean, so many of them are coming from some tough backgrounds. And so honestly, the soccer side of things, if it was just soccer, it'd be really easy.
Right, right.
If all we were doing was just soccer and worrying about, the results, that would be easy. But we found our players, like some of them are coming out of situations where they don't have daily meals, or they don't have access to healthcare, or they don't have access to even like an adequate living situation or
Mhm.
support and home. And so we're finding that holistically meeting those needs and working with them at where they're at, then in turns can be shown on the soccer field. And so
Sure.
the soccer stuff turns out to be very little of what we're doing, so that we're trying to develop these players, but also set them up for success for life, and also kind of help them figure out who they are and who God has created them to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like if you're not eating well, then you're gonna have trouble performing on the field, right? I mean, I had a kid in
Exactly.
my team that like hadn't eaten breakfast a couple weeks ago, and you could just see him just like moping around the field because he didn't have any energy, you know? And like, yeah, it's so important, from from an athlete's perspective to have those basic things. But obviously, like those basic things are more important than the game also. So you're kind of meeting both of
Mhm.
those needs. I know for me, like, so when I grew up, I played basketball, soccer, my main two sports. And looking back, I felt like there was some tension because I think I learned a lot about teamwork and skill development, commitment, discipline, all those things that are so beautiful in soccer. But I also felt like there was some tension because I feel like I was encouraged to be angry because I played better when I was angry, and to be, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like some of those negative things in me were kindled because it made me a
Mhm.
better soccer player. And looking back, I'm like, and thinking about how I, lead my kids and coach my kids. Like, I don't want that to be the case. I do want them to play aggressive and hard, but like, I also want, more importantly, for them to be, learning some self-control and learning how to like channel those emotions and stuff. Like, I don't know. How do you approach that? Like, what do you guys do with that?
Yeah, so I think especially here, and it's probably in the States as well, as far as when it comes to coaching, there's definitely you get responses based on how angry or insulting you are. And
Hmm.
I know there's a style of coaching that's called, but I forget what it's called. But it's very prevalent here. And so I can speak to my experience here. And it's like that is what like the average soccer player is used to. They're used to a coach screaming at you, insulting you, demeaning you. And from that, you then have to respond so that you're not put in that place. And so as a club, our culture is different. And so we speak. Obviously, you have to demand excellence, but there are ways that you could do that that is outside of demeaning somebody as a human being,
Right.
and their intelligence. And so we work with our players and our coaches and like how to find that balance so that here when they step onto our field they experience something different, instead of learning just how to respond to insults and anger, that they can respond to a coach that lovingly supports them but has a high standard of what the expectations are. And if formula, I would love to tell you what it is, but there isn't. And so there's a constant trying to figure that balance out. But I think it comes down to like people know when they are loved and when they are valued. And
Yeah.
so if you pour into a relationship and have that be the basis of the relationship, it speaks volumes into that relationships and gives you the space and the trust to be able to then demand excellence in a way that is not insulting and demeaning. And so we try to approach our relationships with all of our players from that platform first and then be able to speak into their lives.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a different kind of accountability and a different kind of discipline, right? I mean, just, we talk a lot about discipleship in the church, and the root word of that is discipline. Like there needs to be some of that. Like we all need that for growth, especially in developing, fine skills or like, developing excellence. And it's interesting now as you're talking, I'm thinking about the ways that parallels like my experience of even the church culture downtown San Diego. Like people go to so many churches and just get like yelled at by the preacher the whole time, and I've had a lot of people come up to me and be like, I like your preaching because you don't yell at us. And I'm like, yeah, that's weird. I never thought about yelling, yelling at you guys. But you know what I mean? Like, I think there's something in the culture, and it sounds like it's cross-cultural. So I don't know where it comes from, but where we want to, I mean, I think some of it comes from like wanting to control and wanting to get an outcome quickly, that like we feel like if we can assert our will in this angry way, we can get that. But there's other ways to develop disciples, right? And other ways to develop soccer players. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just reflecting as I'm talking here. Well, so like I think most people in Living Water at least know we've got 3 soccer players in our family. Our middle son Sam is like he just wants to be playing soccer like every moment of the day. The other 2 love soccer and they play lots of sports, but Sam is getting pretty good and wants to play all the time. He's playing for like kind of an entry level club team, and it's just been a little bit interesting to explore because I just played rec soccer growing up. I didn't. My sister played club and stuff, but I didn't really like enter like the true soccer world in the United States. Like I feel like there's some reasons that United States soccer doesn't excel at the highest levels because we're kind of kicking ourselves with the way it's so expensive, and there's just these different ways that players get selected. I imagine Ecuador has like a very different soccer culture and system. Like you've been in both a little bit at least. Like how would you compare the two?
Yeah, so I guess I mean my soccer club experience in the States, we're now talking about over 20 years ago. So I think it's even evolved and exploded past from my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just share like a little bit about the differences and kind of, I mean, the US is a major pay to play system.
Right.
And so that's why it is so expensive. It is a money making machine. And so you are already limiting the player who will have access to coaches, to clubs, to opportunities.
Right.
And so that's one of the problems with player developments in the States is the opportunity piece. I will say, like from my experience, I am fully, American culture here in the United States. And so one of the things that I loved about the US soccer system is it's organized, it's
Mm-hmm.
structured, and it's very predictable. And so
Yeah.
like those things, like you can count on when seasons are across the United States, no matter what different league you're playing in.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things I think are pieces that do help development because you do have some systems in place. Here in Ecuador, there's definitely a lot more opportunities for low income players because their system is a little different, and like the better player you are, the more likely you will play for like the top age bracket of your club, and that top age bracket typically plays for free. And so it's based on ability first, and then if you are kind of if you're in a formation type of school, so like a rec league, then that's based on paying per monthly or club dues.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about like Ecuadorian soccer, there's a lot of it's so ingrained in the culture. And so you have family gatherings that you're playing soccer, you're going to the park every weekend to play soccer. And it's so ingrained into the community that it doesn't matter if like, oh, this is your favorite sport or if this is what you're pursuing as a kid. It's just what your family does. And so part of it culturally is soccer means so much. And so it's everywhere. There's lots of access to playing. And one of the things that I love about here is there's kind of this reverse way they look at it. There's a lot of adult leagues. There's neighborhood leagues and
Mm.
your family has played in this neighborhood league for generations.
Okay.
And when you turn 12 or 13 is when they allow like a youth player to play for it. Like you're going to play on that neighborhood league and you're going to represent your neighborhood. And so, in a way, there's a sense of like adults are still actively involved in the sport. All through,
Mm.
I mean, there's under 40 teams, under 60 teams. Like you are playing soccer your whole life. And there's a sense in the States where sports are for kids, and there's almost like an entitlement. So, like,
Mhm.
your kid plays sports, and I do everything so that my kid can play the sport. But I feel like we've lost as an adult, like this ability to play and
Mm.
opportunity to play. So I'd say that's one thing that I do like about the Ecuadorian system. And I think that that's what lends to more opportunities for players because you have a whole family culture that is around playing and you have adults that are continuing to play which is important. Like we should be playing, and I think it's neat to watch kids go to their parents games and they sit there and watch their parents play, which
Yeah.
in the States hardly ever happens,
Yeah.
I think, from my perspective. And so I think that part of it is neat because it's not so structured here. There's a lot of creativity,
Hmm.
flexibility, and there's a lot of small-sided games, which means that you're playing on a smaller field, you're getting a lot of touches, and that's what you need as a player to develop. I have a hard time with the lack of structure, and so those parts are difficult sometimes. It's like we signed up for a league or a tournament, and it's supposed to start next week, and it starts in a month instead because they
Mm.
keep pushing off the date or all that stuff. So like there is cultural aspects of structure that are different here, and there's pros and cons to both of that. So those are some of the differences that I've experienced. And like I said, I mean, there's some good stuff about the U.S. soccer system, and then there's some stuff that hopefully will change over the next couple of years, if it's going to continue to develop players.
In Ecuador, yeah. I mean, I'd pay good money to see Josie or Alan play soccer for sure. So that would be great to watch some parents playing. Um,
Please.
did they
No,
play? I
I
don't
would
know.
love that.
Yeah.
I would absolutely
Um,
love that. I told my mom, so one of the things that when I started the women's soccer team here, because like women weren't really playing, it was open to anybody to show up. I was like,
mhm.
any woman who wants to play, come on down. Like I had in my mind, I was like, oh, it'll be a bunch of young girls. But actually I had a lot of older women who
Oh,
were like, we've
interesting.
always wanted to be on a team. Like, can we play? And I'm like, sure, why not? I mean, at the time there was nothing else. So
Yeah.
we would just have everyone, and it ended up being a lot of moms with their daughters. And so
Mm.
I had an age range of like 8, 9 years old up to 50 plus, and we would have 40 girls and women out there practicing. And I mean, it was really neat and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my mom, I was like, why didn't you ever come to practice with me? It would have been so fun to practice together with you. So it was a neat, unique community that we were able to develop, and the older women poured into the younger girls. And over the years it's now kind of changed, and there's a little bit more like, I mean, we've had to, as we get more competitive, define like the ages and experience and all that. And there's now a little bit more space for older women to play in other leagues. But it was really neat to be able to experience that. And I would have loved it if my mom came to practice with me.
That's amazing. I love that story. Man, yeah, that's so cool. And I wonder if like a big issue in American sports, and I can sense it even in myself, is like parents trying to live vicariously through their kids' soccer exploits. And like if you're still playing, then you don't need to do that because you can still, you can still go out and score a couple goals on your own instead of like having to like pressure your kids to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like
So
there's payout.
Chris,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, so what we will come out of this podcast is I would like to hear the next time that you are on a team and that you're out there scoring goals.
So my league just wrapped up a couple weeks ago, and Sam
Oh,
did come
okay.
to lots of my games. I
Yeah.
had a rough season. I only scored once in that season, but I have been scoring some goals in that league. So I think I start up again in a week if I can get healthy. I kind of been running these ultra marathons the last 2 years. I've run an ultra marathon, and I've really got some overuse injuries that have been plaguing me. So I'm trying to get healthy because I think my season, and it should be more predictable because it's the United States. I think I start either next Wednesday or the Wednesday after. So yes, I am playing, and my
All
kids have had
right.
fun coming out to the games, kind of watching, shagging balls, and mostly just messing around on their own on the sideline. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's been really
That's
fun to
neat.
get back into it. And I'm not like a great soccer player. I'm like a passable soccer player, but it's fun to get keep your body moving, and keep out there and play in a league where there's like no stakes. And if anyone gets upset, you just kind of laugh at them because you're like, guys, we're paying to be here, and there's no reason to like
Uh-huh.
be angry about like a bad call or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I feel like there's some trade-offs with because like even that I can see in the United States, everything is like highly structured. I think one of the complaints is that and our kids actually they play every day after school at the park with a bunch of kids from their school, but that's kind of rare, I think, because I think the way
Mhm.
that it's so structured, it's almost like this is the place for soccer, and there's not really just kind of like open spaces. And I think you're right, it does limit creativity both in the game and just in like thinking about like where you can play. But
Mhm.
I also think there's obviously some benefits to that because you have more coaching and you have more direction, and you're if you have a game on Saturday, unless there's like a hurricane or something, like you're probably going to have a game on Saturday, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But like that family connection in Ecuador is interesting to think about how that would affect just soccer culture of being just ingrained in everything. I don't
Hmm.
know. In some ways I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's neat. And I think that's a big reason why it's been important for us to provide spaces for women to play because they also, I mean, their whole families that they have teams that they followed for generations. They're following the World Cup or the national team. And so like they've been a part of the culture.
For
It's been
sure.
a part of their culture their whole lives, but they've just never really had this space except for the past probably about 10 years. It's kind of opened up. And I think it's been a game changer for them to be able to also share in the culture by actually playing.
Yeah, for sure. Did they come out with skills already? You know what I mean? Like, did they? Because I imagine girls are like out there juggling and kicking the ball around, even if they're not like supposed to. Like, could they play already? You know what I mean?
It definitely is also based on region. That there's probably been a little bit more openness or opportunities to play in other regions of the country and more
Mhm.
smaller towns. I feel like there's women have had more opportunities around the coast. But yeah, I mean, there's some very talented players. And because girls have at least grown up playing with their families or like at the park, there's some really talented players doing like very skilled in like moves and stuff or like small space movement of the ball. And really to me what is lacking is vision of the game and it's the lack of opportunity to play games. And so like having the tactical ability to adjust in games and move the ball as a whole group is probably one of the biggest differences and that lends to not being able to have the same amount of game time as kind of like the male counterparts.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's interesting. And yeah, like even just hearing you reflect, because the kind of the, I don't know, I don't know, the assumption, the stereotype is that like South American players are just more creative on the ball. They have all these like ball skills, and then European kind of more Western American players, like they do all this tactical stuff, but they just don't have like the footwork and the creativity. And you can
Hmm.
kind of see how that develops like really from like truly from the grassroots of like the game. It's not something that you can necessarily like coach. Like you get a Brazilian player over in Europe and like they're doing things that none of the European people can do because they just learn
Yep,
different. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, so coaches, getting back to the coaching stuff, because I want to talk soccer the whole time, but this is a churchy
Yeah.
podcast. So let's talk about church. I don't know, it doesn't even have to be on the nose churching, but I think like it's interesting to think about the different kinds of relationships we have in the world. Like you have like these unique roles. I think as I've gotten older, this has become more like obvious or apparent or something that like
Hmm.
there's a role for a coach that's different than a role for a friend or a role for a parent or a role
Hmm.
for whatever. There's like this place that you have where the space is created primarily to like develop skills, grow in a sport, but there's also this way that like coaches can kind of set the tone for life. And a lot of players in a lot of different sports would call some of like the most influential coaches, like some of the most influential people in their entire lives. Like, do you see that in your work? And like, how does that, like, why is that such a special role?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things is here, and I think it probably goes for a lot of other spaces, is I think there's a lot of people who lack mentors in their life or who lack support at home or we have such we've built, and even in the States, like you've built like family systems that like both parents are working, like everyone
Hmm.
is so busy doing a bunch of stuff. And so like on the soccer field, in a sense, it's like you get to show up and do something that you love with this figure who is investing in you, developing in you as a player, and is building this relationship with you. And so it's a safe place that you could then turn to for advice or for help or for support, that kind of trickles over into these other spheres of your life. And so I think just the unique part of sports and how it is like you're working together, you have a common goal, and your coach is already invested in you because as a coach, like you want to succeed on the field. And so like it's your goal that every single player on your team is able to perform. And so like you're already invested in this relationship. And some of the players that we see on the field, they have no one else in their life.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
like this is their escape, this is their safe place. And so it just naturally kind of builds that opportunity to then go beyond just developing the soccer side of things, to then speak into their lives and to kind of be that mentor, to walk alongside them and allow them to invite you into their life and
Hmm.
be able to kind of help them navigate what they're going through in those spaces. And obviously, there's in the world of sports, there's a lot of coaches who are not either equipped or not interested in doing that. But I
Right.
think because the nature of sport and how you are working together, like it naturally lends the opportunity for the coach to play that mentor role in the lives of their players. And it's kind of like discipling your players. And
Yeah.
so like teaching them this is the game plan for the field, but like there's also a game plan for life. And like here, let's figure out how to walk you through that. And so it's an incredibly unique experience or unique relationship, like you said, and super impactful. And I think the reality is like getting people to realize like how much influence you have and also how easy it really is. And so like I am no expert in relationships or really in mentorship, but like I said, like when I was talking about how I got into coaching, like God just calls us to show up. And so like
Yeah.
showing up in someone's life speaks volumes. And so you don't need to be an expert in all these different fields to be there for somebody. And I think that's what a coach has the opportunity to do. Like you have the opportunity to show up in a kid's life, in a player's life, unlike any other person in their life.
Right.
Most other people in their lives are, you have the parents role and you have teachers, and they also can fill some of those mentorship or guiding roles. But like as a coach, it's so unique and special. And so we just need more people to show up in people's lives, and the
Yeah.
world will be changed.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. And like part of what I hear you talking about is like the significance of being on a team together, like because I think how often or how many adults do you have in your life who are like on your team? You know what I mean? Like who don't like so many people, and it depends on your relationships. Like there's some great teachers out there and some people have great relationships with their parents, but like a lot of people don't, and they have very adversarial relationships with most of the adults in their life. But then when you're like in a team environment like that, like it's pretty obvious that your coach wants you to succeed because like they're on your team. You know what I mean? I think there's something so cool about that dynamic that opens up trust in a different way and just allows you to potentially, if you step into it, which I think is probably a learned skill for sure, even if you don't have to have you don't have to have a degree in psychology or you know what I mean. But like I think there's got to be some ways to learn how to like take that next step and be like, yeah, I'm here for you on the team, but like also if you need anything else, like call me, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good. And yeah, how do you like for you, where do you find yourself growing in your own discipleship and your faith as a coach? Like in it, and as you invest in the players, like where do you find God in the mix?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's been it's been an amazing experience as a coach to walk alongside players and then also be able to experience like how God's speaking into my life at the same time and challenging me through the experiences that my players are facing and learning a lot. I've learned a lot about dependency, and it's like I can't control the situations that my players encounter. I can't control, the things that are going on around me. My relationship with God is like learning to depend on Him as my source of strength, as my source of wisdom, guidance, and being able to face the next set of uncertainties and instabilities that we all face. And so it's been an interesting journey to be able to pursue God in that way and learn
Mhm.
how to depend on Him. And then the goal is then to transmit that same faith to my players,
Mhm.
and help them every day just take a step closer to knowing who God is and who's He's created them to be.
Mm. Yeah, that's so good because it's interesting as you get older and get into these roles of like, I'm not the player anymore. I'm the one guiding the players, you know, and you have to kind of let go of control in different ways. And that does,
Uh-huh.
yeah, there's like an interdependence. There's like a dependence on God in that, but there's also a dependence on like these other people who, you know, you can see their shortcuts, especially if you're coaching them. You're like, I know you can't use your left foot, you know what I mean? Or like, I know your shortcomings, but like I'm still like our success, my success is your success is my success, and we're kind of in this together. I wanted to ask a question about trauma because in our church we've been focused a lot on trauma. This has been like a growing edge for me in my own vocational life and in our kind of practice as a church. And one of the things that we've been learning that's been really intriguing, we've developed some programming around trauma that we call flow groups, and they're very much rooted in like arts and creativity and that kind of stuff. But one of the dynamics I don't feel like we've fully explored, we have a little bit, but not in fully, is how play is this activity that heals, that provides a place to heal from trauma. And I think it's because there's like a controlled vulnerability in play because ultimately it's just a game, you know? You can really put
Yeah.
yourself out there. You can try. You can like be vulnerable in a way of like I might fail at this. Like I might wank the shot to the side. You know what I mean? Like there's ways that you can fail, but ultimately, like at the end of the day, after you've had your moment of sadness because you lost or whatever, like you go about your day and it's just a game. And so there's something in that space and having teammates and you know that's so helpful for folks that are trying to just cope with the larger world. And it's just there's like a sanctuary space in play. So maybe I'm saying more of what I'm reflecting on, but like where do you see that in your work? Like does that make sense to you as like someone who's been so deeply involved in
Yeah.
sport for your whole life?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, I love soccer because I love to play. And
Yeah.
there's a safe space about it, or a safe place about it. It's fun. I can be competitive. I can be who I am because there's
Right.
there's some scenarios in life where it's like I have to tone that competitive nature down.
Yes.
And so to me, like soccer has always been a safe place. And our goal as a club is that our teams are safe places for our players to be able to experience exactly what you're describing, to be able to play and to have this safe opportunity to be free and to enjoy life. So there's that side of things, and we're big into having our players creating a space where like they feel like they belong, like they are here, they are on the team, they're part of the team, they belong, even before they believe. And so they get
Mhm.
to experience that freedom and that safety, and then provide the opportunity to then be vulnerable and grow in the next steps. All that being said, I think part of the tension that we encounter is like we also are pursuing the professional platform, and so
Mhm.
there's a big part of especially players on our top teams have pressure to perform.
Right.
And so that's when this like safe space at the recreational level or the play at the recreational level is then kind of flipped on its head, and it's a pressure environment because in scenarios, especially for our men's professional players and our top women's players, like it's a job. And so there's a lot of things that are riding on this opportunity, because if I perform well, I get to play. If I perform really well, I can get called up to the next level. And then it changes my life because then I could
Right.
then now pay for all these things or, fill these needs that I don't have. Currently, even just this past season, a couple weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of my coaches at our youth girls level. So it's youth girls, but we were encountering players that would come to practice and they were breaking down in the middle of practice,
Mm.
for reasons, and they would share with us, coach, because like it is a safe space, but it got to the point where it's like they're not even able to play. Like we're at practice and they're having a hard time playing and participating in practice because they have so much that is going on. And so we realized as a coaching staff, we had to go through like, what are ways that like we can serve these players so that when they come to practice, like they can play because we
Yeah.
want them to be able to participate in, this opportunity, and they want to play. They just have, they're so have so much baggage that they're bringing to practice. And so we realized that we needed to create spaces in our practices for connections and for checking in. And then we also talked to our team chaplains to be available during certain time slots and communicating that to players, and like even teaching them like, hey, these are the options or opportunities that you have to express yourself or to seek, get help or support. And then within our team, building relationships and a safe space so that when they show up, they feel supported by their teammates and then they could participate. Exactly, kind of, it sounds like what you guys are going through as a church. Like we see that with all of our players.
Mm.
And so even though it's the game of soccer, because of the bigness of it, the professionalism, the money that is attached to it, there's a lot of pressures that are also involved. And so we're seeing as a staff building in moments of pure play is
Mm.
what our players, they need that.
Yeah.
And we all need that, and it's fun. Last week we had a coaches game, and I'll tell you, when we do a coaches meeting, we'll have coaches that are like, "Hey, I can't make it. I have all this going on." We said coaches game, and
Everybody.
all of them showed up. I'm like, I'm sure they told whoever, they moved stuff around so that they could come,
Hmm.
and they were just playing. They didn't have to coach. They just had to show up, and they had so much fun. And so it's been convicting as, as a director to be like, we need to build more opportunity, exactly what you're describing, to have that safe place to play.
Yeah, and you can see how, I mean, so many different things can have that. They're like the double-edged sword thing where like it can be this really great source of healing and like kind of sanctuary space, but like you're saying, and I've seen sports turn this way with friends, siblings in my own life where it can kind of turn the other way where all of a sudden like you're not getting playing time or you're not getting chosen for the team that you wanted to make the team, or and it becomes this like actually it can be a source of trauma
Uh-huh.
in other ways because now there's like this cutthroat competitive edge even within your team, and like one of the beautiful things is like when you have people who are on your team, like you make a mistake, hopefully they're lifting you up, but that depends a lot on the culture of the team. Some teams you make a mistake and all your teammates are screaming at you, you know what I mean? And you got to like create the right kind of culture, which sometimes it's probably hard to, I'm not experienced enough coach, but I imagine that's like hard to do in depending on the personalities you have on a team. But like there's potential for play to be this tremendous good, but when we turn play into something that's not play, then it can almost like hit you back in the face,
Exactly. Do the opposite.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Any other like I want to respect your time. I appreciate you coming on. It's been really great talking to you. You have other thoughts, anything else that you want to share with us before, I let you go? And I'm sure you've got some more soccer to coach or play or be out there with at this point today.
I think that's pretty much it. I think we've covered a lot. It's been a lot of fun. So who is your team? Who's the team that you follow? Do you have
My
one?
team, Yeah, so I'm kind of new to like watching soccer more seriously. I went on sabbatical last year and I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to get into soccer. Hasn't really been easily available as a spectator in the United States, but now it kind of is. So I started watching
Mhm.
La Liga a lot and I kind of picked Atletico Madrid. That's like my team that I've kind of chosen. They started to lose as soon as I chose them, but I still do kind of support them. Uh, and it's been fun. My kids have all kind of picked their people. Sam, who's like our biggest soccer nut in our family, likes Barcelona, and
Mhm.
Ezra, my youngest, he really likes Harry Kane for some reason. I don't even know why he loves Harry Kane so much. So, he likes Bayern Munich a bit. And but yeah, Atletico Madrid. Who's your team? Who do you follow?
I mean, this is a slightly lame, I guess, but I kind of follow Chelsea just because of my name.
Yeah.
And I really like the Chelsea women's team.
Hmm.
So I follow them. But the interesting thing on Chelsea, there is one of their midfielders is from Ecuador.
Oh,
And
cool.
so I enjoy watching him play. He's on the national team here in Ecuador. And he's a big name and a really, really good player. So I guess that's the team that I follow outside of the U.S. women's national team.
Yeah, well, I should say we also support the Wave. In fact, we went to the Wave game just on Saturday night, and we've been having really fun following them. And San Diego's getting an MLS team next year, so we're hoping that they keep
Mhm.
tickets affordable so we can actually like get to some games because that's not always the case in pro sports. But the Wave, San Diego had the Loyal, which was like a kind of lower division team before, and they both
Mhm.
have done a really great job of like giving access to the game so the kids can
Uh-huh.
come and watch and play. So hopefully that continues on in San Diego, and hopefully
Right.
it brings in some support because hopefully it brings in some youth funding maybe and some ways for more kids to have access to playing the beautiful game here in San Diego because it's been really fun getting into
Really.
it. Yeah.
Our goal is, as far as like with my ministry, because we do camps in the US, our goal is to be out in California one of these days, in San Diego specifically. So we would like to
Yeah.
bring some of our players here from Ecuador to run a soccer camp in the Southern California area. I don't know if it'll happen next summer, but within the next 2 years, like we would like to be there.
Well, bring it. We
So
got some connections in
yes,
San Diego soccer scene a little bit now. And yeah, reach out anytime you need some help with that for sure. All right. Well,
perfect.
Chelsey, thank you so much for joining me. This was a really fun conversation. Basketball's been my number one sport for a lot of years, but Sam was asking me in the car the other day, like, do you still like basketball more than soccer? And I did say yes eventually, but I hesitated because I like soccer's been so much fun to
All
get
right.
into this year. And I
Mhm.
love both. I've always loved both sports. And it's just been great talking to you. And especially like I said earlier, I've been considering coaching like a higher level team here. Because I'm not
Mhm.
anyway, it's great, really helpful to reflect on like the dynamics of coaching, get a little
I agree.
inspiration to keep playing and step in that coaching
Definitely.
role. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. Love what you're doing down there. And hopefully we'll see you someday when you come back through San Diego. And many blessings to
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so
All
much,
right.
Chris. You have a good day.
Thanks, Chelsey. You too. Bye.
See you.